Welcome to the Head Shepherd Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Ferguson, CEO here at NextGen Agri International, where we help livestock managers get the best out of their stock. Before we get started, thank you to our two fantastic sponsors for continuing to sponsor this podcast. MSD Animal Health is perhaps better known as Cooper's Animal Health in Australia and for their Allflex range across the world, with a comprehensive suite of animal health and management products. Heifer is a one-stop shop for wool harvesting and animal fibre removal. The Heifer team have a deep understanding of livestock agriculture, backed by Swiss engineering and a family business dedicated to manufacturing the best. We are grateful to our sponsors for their support, helping us bring Head Shepherd to you each week. And now it's time to get on with this week's episode. Welcome back to Head Shepherd. This week we have Enoch Bergman on the show, who is entertaining and very educational, so I'm sure you're going to enjoy that. Before we get underway, we've released another couple of articles over the last couple of weeks, so I just wanted to bring your attention to that. Firstly, Sophie, you've written about when to wean.
Yeah, so weaning for me is one of my favourite topics in sheep. I think a mix of artificially rearing sheep and trying to get them off milk powder as fast as possible, and also if one can have a favourite sheep graph. My favourite sheep graph is the one which looks at pasture intake versus milk intake of a lamb over the first sort of 16 weeks. And that is probably one of the graphs that got me hooked into data and science. And just, yeah, it really shows that when you wean lambs, it has quite an impact on various things, I guess. And be it your cost of production or be it the future performance of the animals, be it the lambs or the ewes. Yeah, I thought I'd write a little article, seeing as people are probably thinking about when they should be weaning, and yeah, hopefully give you some insights so you can make that decision yourself a bit more educatedly.
Excellent, fantastic. So yeah, and I've also written an article which has just gone out over just before the weekend, and that was on bending the growth curve. So looking at, I guess, that whole question which is always out there in both cattle and sheep, mature weight of either cows or ewes. Obviously, we want early growth in most systems, but we don't want those sheep to get too, or sheep or cattle to get too big. So I've talked about sort of, yeah, I guess what we know about that so far and why it's important to keep selecting sheep and cattle down that road. Righto, we'll get underway with this week's show. Enoch Bergman we've also got a YouTube video on this episode, so if you want to sort of watch along, then jump on. He's got a slideshow that we delivered as we went through this interview, so you might actually get more value out of watching on YouTube than listening in the vehicle. It's worth listening to as well, but you'll definitely get a little bit more if you watch the slides at the same time. He's a really great fella to chat with, and I think you're really going to enjoy this show. It's around artificial insemination of heifers, so fixed AI in heifers and the economics around that. He's done a lot of work on that. He's also, you can chase his YouTube channel as well. He's got heaps of videos on there if you like seeing abscesses popped and that sort of crazy stuff, which most people do, unfortunately, for whatever weird reason. He's got some pretty cool vet stuff going on as well. I think over 100,000 subscribers. So, yeah, he's certainly a bit of a star on YouTube as well. So you'll stumble across him if you jump on our YouTube channel as well. But yeah, we'll get underway with this week's show.
Hi guys, Sophie here. Just a little note from editing. The first 5 minutes of the podcast have some audio disturbance in it, which I've tried to fix, and this is the best I could do. But yeah, after the 5-minute mark, it disappears completely, and it's just your normal podcast. But yeah, bear with us for the first 5 minutes, and we'll be away.
Welcome to Head Shepherd, Enoch Bergman.
Hey, Mark, how you going?
Good, mate. Awesome to have you along, and thanks very much for your time. I've been watching your work for lots of years now, and you had your PDS of around fixed time AI and heifers, and sort of a lot of work on the economics of that. So that's going to be what we want to talk about today. But we might just start off how you ended up living the dream in Esperance.
Yeah, man, I am living the dream. So, yeah, I grew up in a little town of nobody out in eastern Colorado, full of lovely people, but there just weren't many of them, called Wild Horse. It was 12 people growing up. It's now down to 5. And I went to uni to try to be able to come back and help my friends and family was the plan. Got into vet school, finished vet school, and in the process realized that there was a much bigger world out there. Kind of went home, and ag had kind of slipped more towards total crop, so a decline of running cattle out that way. So I thought, heck, I'll just go check out Australia for a year, and then I'll come back and figure out where I want to live. And sent my resume over, and a good fella down here, David Swan at Swan's Vets, got a hold of my resume and said, hey, come throw your hat in the ring. So I applied for the job, and he hired me, and I flew straight here. That was back in 2003, Mark. And after a year or two, was going to, either go to South America or head north, because that's what I thought I was getting into. I was a bit surprised down here with all this green grass. It blew my mind, really. And I said to Swanee, look, I think I'm going to head off. He said, we'd love you to stick around. I said, well, look, I've never intended to work for somebody my whole life. If you let me buy into the business here, I'll stay here till I'm dead. So he said, rightio. And I bought into the business. And and the reason I've stayed is Esperance is magic. Geez, beautiful beaches, some of the best in the world. So much to do. But the reason I really stay is because of the people and the animals that they look after. So it's just, I've got new friends and family. The farmers down here are just so keen to adopt innovation. Like, we're one of the last places in Australia to be given out with conditional purchase. I think the last block here was released in '87, remarkably. I mean, that just blows the mind, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So it's a real, a lot of these guys were doing it tough in South Australia and hopped in their 9Gs and came across the dusty Nullarbor and set up down here. And we're able to create a life for themselves and their future progeny. And so the town's really humming, and these guys just love innovation. Yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Excellent. So obviously, well, vet trained, and then through
went
that
to Colorado State University. Yep,
So
I did a food animal medicine internship, a little bit of extra postdoctorate work, Mark.
Yeah, righto. Excellent. And then so obviously getting into AI is a natural progression, but I guess I mean, maybe talk us through maybe the precursor to the PDS and then the PDS itself.
Yeah. Well, when I first arrived in Esperance, a lot of my producers, when I would go preg testing for them, we would find that their heifer pregnancy rates were excellent. Their cow pregnancy rates were acceptable, but their first calver rates were pretty low. And when I started querying them about what they were doing, the practice at the time, mostly for most of my clients, what I got here was they would join their heifers for the same period of time that they joined their cows. I said, look, put the bull out the 1st of June, and we put them in for some guys even up to 3 months, quite a few producers actually. And so I kind of started exploring that with these guys, and they would say, wow, heifers, they do a poor job. They produce crappy little calves, and they struggle to get back in calf. And I said, well, it's not really the heifer's fault. You've kind of set them up to fail a little bit, in that you got to realize that heifers require more time after they calve to prepare their uterus for that next pregnancy. So why don't you try joining those heifers a little bit earlier and a little bit shorter? So I started getting a bit of success in that, because guys would see the pull through of, the heifers calved in a tighter window. They're a little bit earlier. Heifers don't produce as much milk, so the calves fit in a little bit better. If they prime the system where they only expected to get about 80% of them pregnant, those other 20% could be sold before they cut more teeth. So they were reasonably valuable animals. And then those heifers had exceptional conception rates the following year. So then, to try to push that a little bit further, we started syncing them with 2 shots of prostaglandin at the front end, and be 2 or 3 weeks ahead of the cow mob. We could run them at 5% bulls with 2 shots of prostaglandin, and then we could pull some bulls back onto the cows, and we could get some pretty nice conception rates in a 4-week or a 7-week mating with that methodology. So then we had guys having calving trouble here and there. So then we thought, well, heck, if we're going to synchronize them, why don't we capitalize on that synchrony? So I started implementing or integrating fixed time AI in these heifer mating programs. And man, it was just started to kick ass. Like, once people did it and they had that super tight calving, those first 21 days that when a heifer would cycle instead condensed over a single day, and they just get this big slug of calves. And then the caveat to that is we went out there, and that's when the curve benders were just starting to come about. And the first bull we used was a bull called Final Answer, who they eventually cloned. He was such a cool bull. And so he was like -8 on GL. So he was about 8 days early, and he was low birth weight and high weaning weight. So we could have our cake and eat it too. We could get these calves on the ground a little bit early. Again, we could get them nice and small when they hit the ground, because they were kicked out of bed early, and then they would grow like steam and produce a wiener that in many cases, because of the fact that we joined them a little bit early, and because of the fact of that shorter GL, and because of those EBVs for growth, those calves were actually better than the calves out of their cows. And that really started to open people's eyes, because the mantra of many of my producers was, you don't keep heifers out of your heifers. They just do a poor job. I'm like, well, who's your best genetics? And if it isn't your heifers, you're going backwards. But what we were doing is we were terminally crossing our heifers to poor genetics, and then those progeny which we were outing, we were getting discounted because they were smaller, because we're using really safe, low weaning weight bulls, who often was the caveat to the prerequisite to have low birth weight before curve benders became available, mostly driven by gestational length. So we just really turned everything on their head and said, let's keep heifers out of our heifers, which is awesome, because then it frees us up to to terminally cross some of our older cows. Some of those older girls with older genetics, we can terminally cross those for profit, whether we bring in a euro or something like that. So it just creates all this great flexibility within the system. And so we were kicking butt, doing stuff. And then the MLA came up with their producer demonstration sites as a program, which I just love. It's just a great way for producer groups to get a little bit of a profile, like our group, A Sheep and Beef. It's been really good for our group, and also to find something that you're doing well and to help disseminate that information to a wider audience. And so it's just been a dream run. So I'd love to tell you about that PDS, Mark, which I reckon's why you called.
You're onto it, my friend. Yeah, that's exactly what I want to hear about. So,
Dynamite, brother. Got any questions for my little wind up?
No, that's awesome, and I think we're looking forward to hearing the spiel on the PDS, and we'll ask questions as we go. But if you want to launch into it, and for those listening, we are recording the visuals as well, so they'll be somewhere on YouTube. You better find this as well if you want to actually watch. But if not, just listen along, and we'll make sure we make it a good audible experience as well.
Hey, Mark, about 3 or 4 months ago, I got a button off YouTube. So I've got a YouTube channel called Enoch the Wanker. Enoch the Cow Vet.
Excellent. So we'll load on your channel.
I hit my 100,000 subscribers, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, right.
All right, let's get rocking. So
how many subscribers? 100,000.
I got 122, I think.
Awesome.
122,000. Yeah, but they give you a button when you hit 100,000.
Yeah, right. We're well off the button.
You can see that button. There on the screen. Let me walk you through this PDS. So, producer demonstration sites, bloody brilliant. So every time an animal goes to the kill floor, $5 goes into a bucket, and that bucket gets disseminated out for the benefit of all of us that produce protein. And I just think the PDS program was a great one, really good one. I think it helped kickstart a lot of producer groups because, as I say when I give these talks, use your local producer group if you've got something you love doing that you think will help other farmers. But if you don't have a producer group, bloody make one. So essentially, for this PDS, the producers that were involved had to be people that hadn't previously AI'd. So what we did is I had probably about half the district AIing their heifers, but I had a few guys, and some of the guys were pretty big guys that were like, I don't really see the value. Oh, it looks expensive. They had all sorts of reasons why they didn't want to do it. A lot of work, a lot of effort. And so when we successfully applied for the PDS, I approached some of those farmers and I was like, hey, look, it's subsidized by MLA. And they're like, oh, heck, we'll give it a crack. So it was real simple. Like what we wanted is no bias or is minimum bias. So we just enrolled heifers. So essentially hijacked heifers. So these guys, to give you the story, so the PDS application process, by the time we got it done, it was right on the point of the bulls getting ready to go out. And so we hit up these farmers and said, right, you've already got your bulls to put over your heifers? Uh-huh. Hey, how about this? Let's hijack half those heifers. So what we did is based on the last digit of the ear tag, odds and evens, we took half the heifers out, and then they got synchronized and they got AI'd on the same day that the bulls that they already had organized, that they'd already purchased for the job, so there's no bias there, went out with the other heifers. And then 10 days later, they got boxed. And then we managed them identically and just measured stuff, which is pretty cool. So, there are 15 sites, and there's around 2,500 heifers enrolled in the study. So it's got a reasonable degree of power. So that's our producer group there, A Sheep and Beef. It was called A Sheep at the time, but with all the good beef stuff we've been doing, we've added the cattle side to it. That's my practice. One's veterinary services that I'm a partner in, and then Meat and Livestock Australia. We've got a bit of a hand from Vetiquinol and ABS and Richard White from Performance Genetics as far as subsidizing some of the products. And in the economic analysis, we went back and removed all those subsidies. So it was what it would have cost the producer full time. So what was our goal? Our goal was to encourage uptake of fixed-time AI and commercial heifer mating programs. Obviously, if more producers integrated fixed-time AI, the greater population of cattle in Australia has access to potentially superior genetics, and we can all move forward collectively. We needed to estimate the cost of integrating fixed-time AI versus natural mating, so try to develop, a bit of modeling there on. And how do we do that? Well, we'd have to capture some fixed-time AI costs, and we'd have to come up with some bull costs. And then try to capture the differences in these outcomes that we get from these two different interventions, and then estimate that value. So what are we looking at? Well, we're going to target conception rate, dystocia rate, so calving trouble, calf and heifer mortality, weaning rates, and rebreeding rates. And then we'd pull up there. But we'll talk about some stuff later by a guy named Cushman. And what we know is that heifers that are set up to succeed to calve early as heifers and then calve again early again the next year, that will carry on for years, 6, 7, 8 years later. And then out of all that information, let's see if we could develop a return on investment of integrating fixed time AI into commercial heifer mating programs. And I'm not trying to get guys to not buy bulls. I'm just trying to get them to integrate fixed time AI into commercial heifer mating programs. So for most of my producers, they're still buying bulls, and they're back and they're AIing. They're just probably reducing their bull requirements over their heifers by about a third. One of the things MLA wanted, Jeff Neath said, look, I'd love to see just to reinforce the importance of critical mating weight. So looking at, this is just a quick slide on the conception rates we got based on weights. So producers had their heifers enrolled, and admittedly, sometimes the heifers were quite light and sometimes they're quite heavy. And what we saw is what we've seen in the lit, and we already kind of knew that if we get them to about 2/3 of mature cow weight, we can expect a pretty similar outcome. So if they're under 300 kilos, we saw a reduction in conception rate. Interestingly, but it was pretty small numbers. If they're really, really, really big, we had poor conception rates as well. And I think that could have something to do with, there's some cool stuff by a guy named Cliff Lamb, where if heifers are allowed to get exceptionally fat, they have a memory of that obesity, and it's really hard to get them to cycle. It's kind of like if you're driving down the road doing about 110 and you come up behind a caravan, it's pretty easy to get around it, to get on a rising plane of speed. But if you're doing 160 and you come up behind some other bogan doing a similar speed, it's pretty hard to get around them. And I think sometimes those big fat heifers, I think in my experience with AI, really well grown out, incredibly obese heifers are often hard to get to achieve good reproductive outcomes on. And I think there's a little bit of a lesson there, and the stats seem to show it.
That's a pretty solid heifer, over 425 kilos.
Oh man, yeah, those are some big girls. Yeah,
yeah.
That's it. Yeah. A bit of rosy. Anyhow, so the ABS provided us a few cool bulls. So these are some pretty well-known older bulls. Landfall, a couple bulls there. Keystone, widely used around Australia. Broken Bow, Murder Duke Kicking, Command, widely used in the U.S. and here. And then Richard White hooked us up with Aryvale General. Looking at breed plan figures, we got a few of our producers, and because we just wanted to kind of map out and just highlight the differences in the opportunities when you go and buy AI. And this is one of the arguments I had with not an argument, but some of the discussion around some of the stuff on Beef Central was people would say, oh, well, why can't people just go buy these bulls that you're using for AI? Well, you can try, but these are elite bulls. These are your unicorns, on the crazy hot scale. These are some different producers, and these are the bulls that they purchased. So there's all their EBVs across there. And then here's the AI sires that we used in 2017, General, Leonardo, Broken Bow. If we look at that as a graph, it's a bit messy and it's kind of hard to kind of see what we're looking at. But there's the three different farms, and then there's the AI sires, just the average of their EBVs. But let's look at the things that we're concerned with in the context of the PDS. So as far as calving ease, and what I try to strategize to do when I AI for my local producers is I'm trying to buy extreme calving ease bulls. So synchronizing these heifers for the benefit of synchrony, that's my main drive. I'm trying to get more of these girls in calf early so they calf early again the next year and go on to have an excellent reproductive life. But I'm also trying to mitigate dystocia. And there's the maternal side of that contribution to that equation, and then there's the bull side. So if I can chase bulls that are extreme in regard to their calving ease EBVs, hopefully I can moderate some of the female genetics, which might contribute to dystocia. So as you can see, these guys did a good job with their calving ease direct, calving ease daughters, gestation length, and birth weight when they bought these bulls. But we can do better with AI, and I think that's the real key. You can go to a bull sale, but only one guy can buy the top bull. We also selected for growth. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get calving ease, but we're also trying to get animals that will continue to grow well. And the sort of bulls that I love myself are low birth weight, high 200, high 400, maybe cool off at 600 days, and then have a moderate mature cow weight. And you can see that in kind of the percentile rankings here of the bulls that we selected for the PDS. Because I'm not a big fan of monster cows, because monster cows have monster requirements.
Monster appetites. Yeah.
That's it. Got big bellies. Get in my belly. And then, okay, so we needed to crunch some numbers. All right, well, and this is a question I used to ask a lot of farmers about. Hey, what's your bull cost? And they go, oh, he cost me $6,000. I say, yeah, but what is your bull cost? They say, well, I told you it was $6,000. I said, yeah, but what's it cost per calf? So, and I used to run these numbers with producers just shooting the breeze. But so I went on to Beef Central. John Condon quoted in the year of the study, 2017, that the average bull price, Angus bull, was $7,634. So what I say to my farmers is, you got to say to yourself, your bull mating cost is actually your purchase price of your bull minus the cull value divided by his expected longevity. And Phil Holmes did some stuff with a number of his producers showing an Angus average 2.7 joinings before they broke down or were culled for whatever reason. So we went with 3. And I want to quickly point out that in this study, anytime we were given an opportunity to put in an estimate, we always erred on the side of caution. We always, if anything, tried to buy us away from the outcome that we're trying to prove. So the cull value of $2,000, that's a pretty good return for a bull. And this reasonable number of bulls don't even make the truck because they're NCV, blown stifle, can't walk, or horrific penile injury, and unable to, it has to be euthanized on welfare grounds. But so if we look at that, the annual purchase cost works out to $1,878 per year is the purchase cost distributed over. But bulls eat stuff, and so we can't discount that. So what's that worth? Well, a bull eats about as much as a cow and a half. And so then we went to the pregnancy rate over the natural mates in the trial of 82%. And we went at that time, it was about $4 per kilo for weaned calves. And then we went with a conservative weaning weight average for the district of $300. And that told us that the bull was displacing a potential return for the producer of $1,476. Now we add those two numbers together and we get an estimated bull total annual cost of $33.54. Pretty straightforward. Then we take that and multiply times 3%, and that gives us a cost per heifer mated of about $100. So there you go. I mean, you could argue and say it's 80, you could argue and say it's 120, but that's kind of an interesting thing that I think a lot of farmers haven't actually thought about. They know they got a bull that they paid for, and they know you're going to sell him later, but what did it cost per heifer mated? So in our trial, we came up with the $100.
And there's plenty of people that are averaging double that in terms of their bull buying, so that like they're averaging 13-14 grand for bulls, so it's
yes,
it becomes quite a heavy per heifer mating number.
Yeah, and especially if you go back to some of the stones that were thrown at the PDS, and they said, "Oh, look, why don't you just go buy a bull like that?" Well, the bulls that we used in the AI program were $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 bulls as far as on the hoof, and if we would have known for instance, Bald Ridge Command, if they'd have known the semen sales that bull would have produced eventually, he would have been well into the hundreds of thousands. Okay, so in order to calculate the cost of using a bull or integrating fixed time AI, one of the key pieces of information we need is pregnancy rate. So these are all the properties over the duration of the trial. So you get your fixed time AI integrated versus your syndicate mated. Again, the ones that were AI integrated got AI'd and 10 days later joined the same bulls that the syndicate mated bulls were joined to. So they went back together with their siblings 10 days later and stayed together as a group. So if we crunch all those numbers, the difference between properties varied from 21.9% improvement in conception rate, or 21.9% relative improvement in conception rate, down to a negative 6.5%. On average, the average site had a 3.1% better pregnancy rate in the fixed time AI integrated. But when we crunched all the numbers and combined all the numbers together, Mark, we came up with a 0.8% difference. And so 4.6% reduction in the number of empties. So now I had what I needed to start calculating the difference between integrating fixed time AI or syndicate mating. So what we did is we said, right, let's look in the first year, because we don't want to do this every year because, again, we're just trying to get an estimate. We said, rightio, let's look in the first year, let's interrogate the data set, and let's ask ourselves, what if Farm A had integrated AI? What if Farm A had only used bulls? So if we look at Farm A there, if they would have integrated fixed time AI, their conception rate was in their trial was 83.8%, and their bull requirement at 2%, because if you're integrating fixed time AI, you can back them up at 2% rather than at 3%. They would need 8 bulls, and so their total annual bull costs, going back to our mathematics that we calculated on the previous slide, comes out to $26,832. And so the bull cost per head mated would be $68.62. So we've saved a little bit by reducing the bull numbers by a third. Our AI costs per head mated, and this is true cost. So this was travel, this was the semen, This was the synchronization drugs. This was the whole lot. This was the whole box and dice without any subsidies. And if you looked at some of the stuff that was on Beef Central recently, it was mad. Like even just the cost of AI was like $120. I cannot work out where they got their numbers from. They're just exorbitant. Like it's insane. Like who would AI? I mean, you read that, you go, hell, I'm not going to AI. It costs $600 to AI a cow. It doesn't. This is literally what it costs this guy for me to jump in my ute in the morning, go around to the smoko shop, get myself a savory mince, a bucket full of iced coffees, because that's what I do with my YouTube winnings, drive out to the property, hop out, say, how you going? The ladies are on heat. We AI'd while we listened to Metallica through my speaker, and we AI'd 391 cows, and then high-fived the guys, and I drove home. It was $53 per head total cost. So then if we take that, if we do that on the fixed time integrated mating cost per heifer mated, so that's adding the bull cost to the AI cost, that comes out to $122. And then if we divide that by the pregnancy rate, so divided by 0.83, that gives us a fixed time AI integrated mating cost per pregnancy of $145.61. Cool. Now, the cost difference here will make sense in a minute, and that's on this next picture. So if we look down here, if the same producer would have said, right, I'm not going to AI, bugger it, it's too expensive, it's too much of a pain in the ass. Well, when with the girls of his that were syndicate mated, we got an 81.2% conception rate, but he would have required 12 bulls. So that would have worked out to about $40,000 in annual bull costs. For a total mating cost of $102. The AI cost would have been $0. So the combined cost would have been $102.94. Syndicate mating cost, so dividing that number by 0.81 gives us $126 per pregnancy. That gives us an $18 difference. So for that particular producer, it cost him an additional $18 to integrate fixed time AI. And I guess our goal is to help him regain that through better performance. And if you were to say, nah, I don't believe in the 2% thing, well, that's okay. If that's the way you feel, we can go ahead and if you look at 68 minus 102, that's another $32, $34. You could just add $34 to that $18.84, which would give you $52 was the cost difference if you wanted to run the same number of bulls. Okay, now for fixed time AI doesn't work for everybody. In the economics in this context. And so Farm B is a classic. So Farm B only had 38 heifers. So at 2%, he's going to need one bull. And at 3%, he's going to need one bull. So he didn't save anything on his bulls. And I guess that's kind of what I was referring to with the last fella. And because he's a small guy, the cost of travel to get out to his place is a bit higher, those fixed costs. So for him, the cost of AI was $64.87 per head because he had smaller numbers. And so it came out for a total integrated cost for him of $153.13. Now, I will kind of just chuck in here for a minute, Mark, that guys like him that only have about 30 or 40 heifers, often what I get these guys doing is I say, look, how about this? Keep all your heifers and then just sell the really ugly ones, the really ugly ones, the snaggletooths, the ones with horns, the one that's trying to eat you. And then just do one round of AI and that's it. And I've got a reasonable number of producers doing that. They just do one round of AI, bang. And then we preg test 6 weeks out. Everything that's empty goes into a grassy contract, or because we've got more long feeding going on in WA, we got feedlotters chasing 400 kilo calves, heifers. They've got an outlet for those animals. And then that would take his bull cost, his total mating cost will be $64.87. And then all of a sudden he would be $20 in front on that cost difference rather than $60 behind. So anyhow, a little bit of a quick caveat there, but you can kind of see the point of what we're doing as far as this cost difference. So when we took all these different properties and looked at their bull requirements with or without integrating fixed time AI, and then calculated and this is their true cost on their AI program. In the end, here's what we showed was that the average producer in that first year spent an additional $23 on that in the value of that calf to put another calf on the ground. It's pretty cool. So I was looking for a cool analogy. So I was like, all right, baseball, love baseball. I love cows. I love cows and baseball. So luckily I was able to find this, which is pretty cool. I was giving a talk in South Australia one time down south of Adelaide at Hondorf. and there was an old golf course, 18 holes that had shut down, and someone was grazing it. I was thinking, man, how cool would that be to have an 18-hole golf course rotationally grazed, where every day you go out there, there's a different hole that has like the cow bias. And if you drop it in a lump of a cow pat, you get to do a drop. Ball washers everywhere. How rad would that be? But yeah, love to see grass being used to feed the planet, and also this grass. If we were to mow that and then put it into a mulcher, it's going to produce a shitload of methane. So instead, what I want to do is I want to take that grass and feed it to a cow, so we can produce a bit of protein, and we can spill a little bit of methane, which 12 years later will degrade back into carbon dioxide. And that's far better for the planet than to allow that grass to just fall on the ground.
Nicely added that in there, mate. That's good. Yep.
Well, I gotta tell the truth. It's pretty obvious who's incredibly organized.
Yeah.
Who's destroying our planet?
Yeah.
Who's got the money in their pockets?
Yeah. Those other guys.
Oh, man. Sequestered carbon. Let's put it in the atmosphere. Cows. Let's recycle carbon. Who do you think's killing the planet? We're the recyclers. Bloody hell! It's just madness, Mark. It's bloody madness. It is insane. Okay, so here we are. We're behind by $23. Natural mated versus fixed MAI. Ding, 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 ding. All right. Now we got labor costs, right? So, you can't not include that. Otherwise, it's a bit of a furphy. Now, interesting. This is a cool story. So one of the biggest producers that we had, the owner was a good friend of mine, Simon. He's like, nah, I don't know if I want to do this. And I was like, well, he was the president. He was the cattle committee president. So I was like, well, you got it because, you're the cattle. So he goes, all right, so we'll do it. His workers loved it. Calving was a dream because they calved a nice tight window. The next year we're putting the devices in. Simon's out there helping put them in. I said, hey, Simon, what do you reckon? He goes, oh, it's a lot of work. And all the workers who were running cattle up the race, they attacked him. They said, oh, fuck off. You're not out here pulling calves, you prick. So it's the difference between scheduled labor and unscheduled labor. Yeah. And when it comes to calving season, unscheduled, which one's obviously more advantageous. So estimating producer costs, we got a bunch of farmers in the room, said, rightio, how long? And we surveyed them all, guys that were in the PDS. So let's work out what it costs you. So it's estimated. The guys, we came to a conclusion collectively that it takes about 40 man hours, including mustering, per 100 cows enrolled in fixed MAI. So you got 100 cows, it takes about 40 man hours to put the devices in, pull the devices, give prosty, and stand around while I'm AIing them. I said their time's worth they said $30 an hour. So he said, all right, $1,200 per 100 head AI'd, works out to $12 per 100 head AI'd. We divided that by the fixed time AI pregnancy rate of 82.7, came up with $14.50 per pregnancy additional. So, we're falling in the hole. We're behind. It's a bit like, I don't know, did you watch the Socceroos the other day? With
no.
Oh man, they're getting their ass handed to them by Zambia. And then they just pulled their socks up and four unanswered goals. It was awesome.
Yeah, right. I didn't see that.
Yeah, it was mad. All right. So if we go back to this slide, now we can look at some economics. So again, here's our difference, 0.8%. So we guys in the room as well, I said, all right, guys, we need to work out what's the value of a pregnant heifer versus an empty heifer. Now here's an important part of Mr. Enoch and the way I view the world. I don't want to get all the heifers pregnant. I got a friend of mine. He was a neighbor growing up, Kit Farrow. He came and interviewed. I don't know if you've run into Kit, but he's one of the top seed stock producers in the U.S. now, raising composites. And he was just getting going, but he's had a lot of success since. And he came and spoke at my vet school one time, and he asked the vet students. He said, "Guys, we were all there. What's better in your heifers, 95% pregnant or 85%? And, the crowd's like, this guy's an idiot. He goes, 95%. And I was like, 85, kid. And he goes, Enoch, is that you? Hey, man, don't mess up my story. And he's right. If you get all your heifers pregnant, you've given them too much. You've looked after them too well. You want that first heifer mating to be a hoop, a selection criteria. You want to improve your herd, and getting them all pregnant doesn't put any selection pressure on them. So I've really pushed my producers to join more heifers, join them short, and value add that empty animal. So I've really pushed them to not overemphasize the value of that pregnant heifer, because it used to be they used to join them for 12 weeks, really wanting to get them all pregnant and feeling really good about themselves. And then the next year they were empty, a lot of them, 20% of them, and they had already cut teeth. So they had 4 teeth now. Now they've got a much decreased value proposition, and they've produced the last calf born. So it's this tiny little calf. And I was like, this is a false economy, guys. We don't want these heifers to get pregnant. So we came up with $100, so we said that's 80 cents difference. So that puts us on the board at $1. Now, some people might say, oh, a pregnant heifer, well, it's worth a lot of money to me. Well, hell, put that number on the left up more than if you want to, but we put it down at low rate. So then we looked at dystocia. And so it's just calving trouble. And some guys like far out, that farm D had almost a third of their naturally mated heifers had calving trouble. It's huge. But when we looked at all the stats across the board for all the different properties, for most the average property had twice as much dystocia in the natural mates versus the ones that were AI'd and joined with the same bulls. So a lot of the dystocia within the integrated fixed time AI group were still from the same bulls that were in the syndicate mate, but we're able to cut it in half. Because if you look in the integrated fixed time AI group, about 70% of the calves were born from AI, because the conception rate goes around 60% to AI. So, and the 10% are gone, the empties. So, so the majority of the calves are born from fixed time AI. So that's a 5.1% reduction. When we combine the whole data set, and what we found is larger producers, I think, had more flexibility to buy appropriate bulls to manage dystocia. So in the larger properties, the dystocia effect wasn't as extreme. So when we combined the data set, it was 1.6% reduction in dystocia, or 21.9% reduction. So we go with that number rather than the big number. And we said, right, what's that cost? And we said, what does it cost to get the cow into the yard, bring her to the yard, put a hand in, get the calf delivered, manage the cow and calf, put her back in the paddock. So I said, well, what if the heifer does? It doesn't matter. What if the calf does? Doesn't matter. Just the intervention. What does the intervention cost you? And sometimes you got to call me. And so the team came up with, well, it's about a $200 event. So we said, all right, 1.6%, that's $3. All right. So there we go. We're up $4. Cool. Then we looked at calf mortality, and calf mortality was pretty interesting, right? So, on the average farm, it was a 60% higher rate of we were able to reduce 60% of the mortalities. So we went from 6.7% in the naturally mated down to 2.7% in the syndicate. So we were able to almost reduce by 2/3 the amount of calf mortality. In the combined data set, again, similar to my previous comments, we were able to pretty much have it. So half as many dead calves. So that's pretty cool. 2.7%. So we said, well, what's that worth? So we said, rightio. Well, let's say that a little calf on the ground with his whole future in front of it, eventually he's going to be worth, $1,600. But what's he worth now? Let's say $500. And it depends on whether you out your empties at calf marking, which I encourage people to do, wet, dry, get rid of your girls that lost their calf or failed to calf. And so we came up with $500. We said, right, that's worth $1,350. And these are the kind of bulls we were trying to raise. This was a first calf born out of Pimp, who's a local producer, 17 days early, 32 kilos, grows like steam. So if we plug those numbers in, we're $18. We're getting closer. All right. Heifer mortality, there wasn't much of it. So as far as statistical significance, we can show numerical stuff, but statistically there just wasn't, the data set's not large enough to have statistical significance on that. But here's what's so rad. Like, we were able to, reduce mortality by 95% in the AI versus syndicate mated, according to the data set. But again, it's numerical, not statistical. And then when we looked at the combined data set, we reduced the heifer mortality by 75%, for a total mortality reduction of 1% real. So we said, well, what's a heifer worth? A pregnant tested in-calf heifer on the point of calving, so she's got a cow, she's getting ready to calve versus now she's deceased. And we said, well, that's worth $2,000. So I said, that's $19. So, hey, we broke even. Winner, chicken dinner. So the cost of integrating fixed time AI, it's even money, and you got genetic improvement, which we haven't even factored in. But there's more, Mark. There's more.
Give it to me, Matt. That'd be great.
All right, give it to you, brother. So sadly, we couldn't get weaning weights from everybody. But we knew this is what we would see, because most guys were unable to pair up, calves with mothers. But luckily, we had a few farms that could. And it was consistent. And it's not surprising that it was consistent. So here's the weaning weights of the fixed time AI integrated versus the syndicate mated. And there's the average. So if we look at it numerically, the girls that were integrated had AI integrated versus the syndicate mated. On average, those calves are 15 kilos heavier at weaning. And this makes sense for a number of reasons, right? So what are those reasons? Well, here's one is, our 200 and 400 day weights are superior. These genetics, EBVs are based on good science. And so these animals are genetically superior. They've also got some environmental influences, such as gestational length. So they're able to hit the ground early with a reasonable amount of size to them and keep growing. And then also synchrony. So here is this is just like my favorite slide on the whole thing. So this is pretty rad. So the blue is the calving distribution from the fixed MAI integrated calves, and the orange is the syndicate mated. So the fixed MAI integrated on average calved 8 days early. And you can see the nice bell curve distribution there. So we took those first 21 days that they would have cycled, and we said, all right, you're all pregnant on day 0. And so, 279 days later, wash, there you go. Now, the syndicate mateds, they've got the similar distribution, but they've got a 21-day plateau in the middle. So you can see that comes up, then you get a flat for about 20 days or so, and then it's down again. And you can also see on the AI integrated, see the first hump, and then out at 21 days later, you can see the second hump. And then at 42 days later, you can kind of imagine a third hump, which is what you'd expect.
Yeah.
It's pretty rad. And that's why with my guys in Esperance, I say, right, let's wait 10 days. Let's put the bull in for either 4 weeks or 7 weeks. So what we're trying to do is not pull the bull out right in the middle of a resync. So the bulls on average calved on day 10.8. The AI integrated animals calved on average on day 2.7. So that's the entire distribution of all the calves, AI'd and backed up by bulls, calved on day 2.7 of the calving season for an improvement of 8 days. So that's super rad. And so that 8 days equals probably 8 kilos. And so this is some stuff Cliff Lamb pulled together and did the stats for me. And it was highly significant, the difference in relative calving date. So 2.65 versus 10.84. Super cool. And that's the whole driver. That's my whole career as a cattle vet, to try to get heifers to calve as early as possible without calving trouble, so that they can go on to be a good cow and do good things. So the weaning weight difference, we said, right, $4 per kilo. So that's another $60. So man, that just puts us way in front. And then again, this is my big driver. This is what I'm trying to do. So this is the survival curve on, when all the calves are born, 100% all the way to the right, 0% on the left. And day 0 is, Dr. Google's calving date, 283 days, post conception. And so in the AI integrated, 63.8% of the calves are already on the ground. That is kick ass. And we know that cows take about 55 days to start cycling. And according to the lit, heifers take 20 to 30 days longer. So heifers, conceivably, everything to the left of that line is cycling when the bull goes in. Everything to the right of that line is going to start cycling at some point whilst they're in with the bulls. And that's going to put those animals on the right side of that line at a disadvantage. So what we're trying to do is get more of these heifers on the left-hand side of that line, so that when the bulls go in, they're going, give it to me one more time. And so that they can go on to continue to do what we need them to do, which is to raise high quality protein to feed the world, because no one does a better job than we do. No one, especially not soybeans. So that's the rebreeding success. This came out in spades. It's super cool. Like, look at these stats. There's a couple farms there that was inverted, but man, it's just super rad. Have a looky loo. So on average, we had a 4.5% better conception rate real time to the ones that were AI integrated versus naturally mated. So, we had a 90.4% conception rate in the AI integrated ones versus an 85.8% in the syndicate mated, for a real time combined data set improvement of 2.7%. And these are girls that, when at that rebreeding, these are the girls that hurt the most, in my opinion. They, I reckon a girl that's fallen pregnant as a heifer and then come up empty as a first calver, that's the biggest tragedy of all, in my opinion. And so we push that pretty hard, and saying that's about $1,000 difference, because there's an animal that would have been a highly successful member of the team, and now it's heading down the road with 4 teeth and only raised 1 calf. It's economically just, you've lost. So it's a 2.7% difference. That's $27. So that puts us right in front, $124 versus $37, which means big money, winner, chicken dinner. You gotta love what you can find on Google. But so that's the PDS. But what I want to harp on for a minute is that it's not just about those first 2 years of an animal's life. This is where things really kick ass. It takes these heifers longer to get back in calf. And so a heifer that conceives at the same time as a cow is going to be later. So by getting them to calve early, we can get them to hopefully calve early as a first calver, and then they're going to power forward. One of my clients locally, what we do for him is we AI them, and he only keeps the heifers from his AI. Everything else he sells on his preg tested calf. He backs them up for like 6 weeks and sells them to somebody else. As 6-week joining naturally mated with good bulls. He only keeps the heifers that conceive to AI. And then the next year we AI them again as first calvers. And he's getting like, between 70 and 80% conception rate on those. And so they're calving again early again. And he was bragging to me, he's getting something like over 90% of his entire cow herd now is calving within the first 21 days of the calving season. He's just monstering it. It's super rad. But this is some kick-ass stuff by Cushman, which really illustrates that point. If we can set them up as heifers to succeed, it pays dividends for years. So this was, I think, at Miles City, Montana. Some lady passed away. Her husband had passed away. She didn't have kids, or kids didn't want to farm. She donated her farm to the university, and they didn't know what to do, but they did a big twinning study where they just kind of let the cows do what they wanted, but they measured everything, and they tried to see if twinning was heritable. Cushman went back after this study was done, a 10-year study, no intervention, but they just kept track of everything. And he interrogated the data set. He said, I want to work out some interesting stuff. And here's what he wanted to know. He said, if a heifer calved in the first 21 days, how did that affect her longevity? And how did it affect her conception rate subsequently? And how did it affect her weaning weight subsequently? So if you think of the blue ones as an animal that calved in the first 21 days, that's the blue. They stay blue all the way through. Then the second 21 days is the orange, and the gray is the last 21 days. And so what happened the next year? So in the first year, it was 100% across all because, the empties had already been pulled out. And when they calved,
that's pretty cool.
That's when they said, you're a blue, you're an orange, you're a silver. So in the second year, interestingly, as first calvers, if they calved in the first 21 days, their conception rate was 93.5%. Versus if it was the second 21 days, it was around 87%. And if it was in the last 21 days, it was down around the 82, 83. But in the third year, they still had a better conception rate, still in the low to mid 90s. If they calved in the first 21 days as a heifer, not irrespective of what they did as a first calver. And it wasn't until 8 years later that they become no longer statistically significant. So that's that pull through of that benefit of having calved early as a heifer. And why do they start to kind of merge together? Well, partly because as they start to distribute out, the ones that are on the back heel of that bell curve, they're disappearing from those second and third 21 day groups. They're disappearing. So the ones that the bell curve distribution, are getting a little bit earlier, they're starting to merge with the full curve of the first 21 days. So if you look at the girls that calved in the first 21 days, 9 years later, there's still about 60% of them still on the farm, while there's only about 40% of the ones that calved in the last 21 days. So the only reason they start to the whole story starts to fall apart, not the only reason, but part of the reason is because so many of the other ones have actually exited the system. So we've hurt their longevity significantly. And if you look at weaning weights, the same story. Bang, 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 bang. And Cushman's data set in the end, in his summation, he said, if they calve in the first 21 days of the calving season, they, in their lifetime, if they all get out to 8-9 years, will have weaned the numerical value of an additional calf in their lifespan. That's huge.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's Brad, Brother Mark. So early and short heifer joining, early and short heifer calving, join heifers before for less time, good selection tool, older, bigger weaners, releases extra bulls, buy heifers more time to get back and calf a second time. We just need a cool slogan for this. Like the best heifers are pregnant heifers. Yeah. Let love pick your keepers. Yeah, it's kind of, I don't know. This no tragedy in an empty heifer. I often say this, and there is no tragedy in an empty heifer. These are empty heifers. They got good value. But here's my favorite slogan that really illustrates the point. Don't get married to your heifers. Just because you think they look good, let the AI or the bulls pick your winners. In New Zealand, as you know, this is legal, but over here it's not. Well, for a lot of my guys, I do a 3 to 4 week mating, 2 rounds of AI, or 1 round backed up by 2%. Some guys actually sell them preg testing. This was actually at a dairy. I stuck the sticker on a little Jack Russell, and he came back about 20 minutes later. I reckon one of the dairyman workers just scratched him up as a joke. And the last thing I say to my cockies is pick your heifers before they're born. If we're AIing your heifers, keep those progeny. So many of my guys are like, you don't keep heifers out of your heifers. After I finally got them talked into it, I was like, of course we do, man. We just use like a $70,000 bull over your best genetics. We need to. So pick your heifers before they're born. Like my dad, when I went to uni, he said, you're going to meet a lot of girls, Enoch. And I'm like, yeah, right, Dad. He goes, You just need to make sure you find out what their mother looks like. Geez, what a horrible bit of advice. Did I get freaking shut down time after time until I freaking learned that was a dumb. He obviously wanted me to join the priesthood. It's the same with your cows. If you got a good cow, mate that cow. And if you're keeping your heifers out of your heifers, you've got the opportunity to stratify your cow herd into good cows and not so good cows. And the not so good cows terminally cross those ladies. Get a char, get a simi, do something with them. And then my dream run is to run AI over my cow herd and AI over my heifers. Heifers only get just straight AI, nothing else. Bulls, the cow mob, my good cows get one round of AI and then backed up with a terminal. And then the not so good cows, just a terminal. But pick your heifers before they're born, because this guy's the same age as me, and I thought he was the coolest guy in the world. But alas, he grew into a heroin addict. So you never know what they're going to turn into. Always look to the dam, like my dad said. When cows, good udders, good feet. She's got really good feet. 50 years old, get good bulls. Look, these guys, you just never know what something's going to grow into. And it's amazing how many free martins you run into. There's, blonde Aquitaine, red Angus. Like this little dude here, low birth weight, calving. He reckons his scrotal circumference is superior, but I doubt it. He's not known for veracity. Big mature cow weight. I think he's got a low scrotal circumference. This is the cool thing about the PDS. We did some surveys where, we got in front of a crowd, passed around a survey. These are actually the core producers. We asked them, do you think is this gonna be good? And they were kind of like, yeah, we're going to give it a try. After the trial finishes, I'm going to continue to AI. It's going to give me better bull price, bull purchasing flexibility. It's going to make my heifers quieter. It's going to make my calving season easier. It's going to save my labor costs. It's going to be profitable. It's going to be affordable. It's going to increase my weaning weights. It's going to improve my heifer rebreeding rate, my heifer conception rate. And if you look at the scores, especially the labor costs, people were negative on. But on all of them, they were kind of like meh. But after the trial, they were just like, fuck yeah.
All over.
Yeah, and that's just like the stuff on Bevo Central. It's just like, guys, these aren't estimates. This is real stuff. This is real life. I mean, we hijack these heifers and expose them to this opportunity. And look, it pays dividends. Like this isn't a thought experiment. This is real life stuff. This is achievable. This is doable. AI is not just affordable; it's profitable. And then when we did some post field days, we surveyed the producers that came to a big field day. We said, "What do you reckon?" And then we gave a jibber jabber like we just did now. And then they went, "Oh, I can see that. I'm going to give this a crack." And that's the goal of the PDS. See if you can convey the value of interventions to producers. So again, at that same survey, we said, "Look, are you considering using fixed time AI?" The answer was kind of meh. And then post survey, we went from 44% saying, "Yep, I'm going to consider it," to 70% said they would consider it, which is pretty cool. That's what we like to see, because these dudes work for us. And if they calve early and improve our genetics, they're a good employee. Because what do you see here? I see a heifer that needs AI. What do you see here? That's my dog. I don't know what you see. Love the heat. Get in the kitchen. This is the morning I went to AI for a guy. Guy took a photo, so that's why they call it on heat. Just the exertion of riding each other. It's pretty cool. Steam. Before you try to AI them, this is my wife. Make sure they're not pregnant. That's my son Eli. That's Lewis. I just finally got a heifer, and I even got an Angus. That's my son Angus. Yeah. And I'm a big fan of weaning early. And if my son comes home like that, I'm going to wean him early. There you go. Join more heifers. Join them short and early. Preg test early. Calve with feed. Wean early. And consider AI. And definitely do a producer demonstration site. It's the go.
Excellent. Beautiful sales pitch, mate. What, 5 years on from that survey, how many of those producers are still AIing heifers? Has there been any reversion, or is it just going up and up?
I reckon 70% of my producers are AIing. Yeah, we've had some really tough seasons to where people didn't keep their heifers, so a few guys dropped out. Yeah. But AI seems to locally, just every year we pick up a couple more people, and I think eventually it'll just become standard practice, much like the dairy industry. Like, you wouldn't speak to many dairymen that don't AI. I think AI, in my opinion, and someone else said this, I'm not the first guy to say it, but another person and a producer talked years ago said, a heifer that isn't AI is a missed opportunity. And I think that's true. And the synchronization programs that we've got are just so much more reliable, as long as we can hang on to estradiol. And if we do lose estradiol, then if we can, make it work with GnRH. But look, you're really seeing a lot, Mark, in the Wagyu job.
Yeah.
But that F1 is the value of that F1 is completely predicated on the quality of the sire, and also Wagyus tend to be relatively good for calving ease, so it's kind of a win-win over large groups of heifers to supply that marketplace. But I just wish the seed stock industry, like my local seed stock producers, for the most part, they get it and they're like, oh, that's cool what you're doing. And if anything, by integrating fixed time AI, we've seen a real shift in the producers in regard to the bulls that they select at the bull sale. They're reading breed plan a lot better than they used to. They used to just buy the good looking bull, which sometimes led to problems. But I think a much better understanding of breed plan. And there's so much measurement and effort that's gone into creating those EBVs, and if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. But if you don't understand how to capitalize on that measurement, then you're not going to be able to use it to improve your outcomes either. So that's a real win. I think a greater appreciation of breed plan.
Yep, because you're reading a semen catalog, you kind of have to. You've only really got the numbers to look at, and so and a photo or two and a video.
A picture there too.
Yeah.
A lot of that's genetics in a bucket.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's I think we've got to reach a stage where all the stakeholders see the merit, see the value, and it's just an evolving process.
Yeah.
I don't believe, like, if 20% of your cow herd is heifers and we're reducing your bull requirements by a third, essentially we're reducing bull purchasing requirements by 3.333%. And I don't see why a seed stock producer would feel threatened by that. I think part of it's just there's the occasional guy who tries to raise their own bulls from the AI. I think that alarms people. And I say to guys, well, what do you know about the mother? Like, your local seed stock producer has generations of data to give you a predictable outcome in regard to feed, in regard to attitude, in regard to growth, et cetera, et cetera. I can give you a hell of a good sire, but you don't really know much about the mother. So I try to generally discourage people from trying to raise their own bulls. But
that's, I guess, what seed stock producers want to hear, and there'll be people listening now that want to hear that. I guess with genomics now, you can actually learn something about those females. So I don't know about New Zealand, but in Australia, they've really limited access to genomics. You can do a heifer select, which gives you a small suite of EBVs, but I think you've got to be a registered Angus seed stock producer in order to get full access to the suite of genomics. Yeah, that's a discussion for now. There's ways and means, I suppose, with the IGS and stuff. So, but anyway, we don't need to get into that. But the one thing I just did want to pick up on before we close out is that 2.7, the average matings of a bull of 2.7, which is probably one of the biggest problems I hear in the industry is just bull longevity, just not getting enough matings out of bulls. Have you got any data on that? Is a particular people doing better with how long they're getting out of a bull? They just seem to want to break all the time. Look, so this is going back to Phil Holmes again, and I was speaking at the Hereford National, and he said, the Hereford bulls are averaging 6 joinings. Yeah, which is a lot. There's two sides to that story, though. Like, if I look at an Angus bull that I bought 6 years ago, so we do a lot of pre-breeding bull work in Esperance. We do a fair bit of jump testing, which isn't done that much anymore these days, and semen testing. And I'll pull the bulls up on breed plan as I'm doing them, and we'll look at them. And sometimes we'll have a bull who's kind of a little bit on the fence, and I'll with my producer there, I'll say, oh, hey, geez, this guy's got some real merit. I think we should maybe give him another crack. And then another bull will be like, oh, geez, this guy, he might have been a good bull when you bought him, but he's the breed moves on. Yeah. So I think that bull longevity is a real issue. The biggest issue, I think, is that first season wastage. And so one of the PDSs that we're working on right now, and we got a little bit of success. Numerical success last year in reducing bull wastage by 5%, but there's still a long way to go to prove the concept. But we in Esperance, at least, we perceive that there is a infectious bovine balanoposthitis and pustular vulvovaginitis, which is a bovine. Yeah, that's a mouthful. Supercalifragilistic. What? I call it exploding dick syndrome, which is a heck of a lot easier to remember.
but it's a bovine herpes virus. And the IVR vaccines that we use in feedlots, especially RhinoGuard, it was designed from an IBPPV isolate. And what that virus does is it creates little ulcers on the penis and prepuce. And we see a lot of bulls, young bulls, first season bulls, a lot, like most of them, like probably 90% of the bulls that break down with balanovacitis, or, inflamed penis and prepuce, are first season bulls within the first 2 to 3 weeks of joining. And so we started screening them and found that they were seroconverting, meaning had antibodies to bovine herpes virus, which is the same as the same assay as what we use screening for IBR, infectious bovine rhinotracheitis, the feedlot. So we thought, well, heck, let's get this feedlot vaccine, RhinoGuard, and give it to the bulls. So we started doing that, and our producers locally perceive, and in the PDS, we surveyed them at the end of the first year and said, do you perceive that the vaccine is helping you, and do you intend to continue using it? And on the 9 to 10 scale, I think it came out at 9.3. So the producers strongly believe that it is assisting them in managing balanovacitis. But when we actually looked at the numbers, and I rang every producer I could get a hold of in Esperance and said, look, were your bulls vaccinated? Were they not? We had a 15% breakdown rate in the vaccinates and a 20% breakdown in the non-vaccinates. So so we had an improvement. It was disappointingly underwhelming. So we'll see what we come up with this year. This year hasn't been as bad. And I think there's a whole bunch of things that go in there that combine. I think that environmental conditions were very sandy here, and last year was incredibly wet. And so I think if they're in a very sandy paddock where the mud is very gritty and sandy, I think it abrades the penis and prepuce. But I think a concurrent infection with IBPPV, I believe, is a significant risk factor. And so we're trying to prove that it's actually worth doing. There was an article in Beef Central about that as well. That's probably the biggest issue. The other one I wonder about is, like, I'm getting ready to go through my own bulls here next week, and I'm going to run them in and go through them and divide. I've got 3 different manager groups they're going out into, and I'm going to give them RhinoGuard, and then the other option is MH plus IBR as the other vaccine, but 2 doses. I'm going to take and split them into 3 different management groups as bulls and park them for a couple weeks before they go to work. And then hopefully just keep an eye on them to make sure that they're comfortable with each other. And rather than, I think, chucking bulls out from you got your bull paddock and you go and you gather, they've got their hierarchy and they're mostly sitting in their corners and they kind of hate each other, but they just mostly just send bad texts to each other. You take a handful of them and chuck them in a paddock together, and you've taken out Cletus, the Wonder Thumper, who was keeping everybody under control. And now you got, Joe Bob and Billy Bob, who decide to have a scrap to see who's the new top dog within that cohort. And so I don't know if it's beneficial or not, but I'm going to try to run my bulls in a little cohort before I put them out in the paddock. And I'm hoping maybe that'll help with some of these stifle issues. That's a big one, is, a cow's up on the job and another one just comes in and smokes the stifle. But the penile breakdown stuff is just soul crushing. Last year I got in a hurry, and within the trial, Mark, because I was doing the trial with the RhinoGuard, I picked up these 3 new bulls, and I was putting them out with my first calvers. I was like, they'll be all the same age. First calvers, pretty small frame, they'll be right. And I was like, I should vaccinate them. And I was like, I won't vaccinate them just for the benefit of the trial. They blow me down. Every one of those bastards broke down in the willow. Every one of them. I was like, I should have vaccinated.
Well, you'll know that for next time.
Yep. Yeah, I'm definitely vaccinating them this year, because that was a painfully expensive process.
Yeah.
Like my grandfather used to say that about me. I'd be running around and go, "You're like a bull in a china closet, son. What you don't break, you shit on."
Right, mate. We better leave it there. We're about to crack the hour, but that's been awesome to hear that PDS and just all of your experience. We'll make sure we find your YouTube channel and hook that up in the show notes, as well as your Swans Vet there, if anyone wants to get in touch and have a yarn.
Yeah, check out A Sheep and Beef. That's our producer group. We're doing some cool stuff, and we hope to continue to do some cool stuff. And thanks a lot for putting me on the Head Shepherd, brother.
Excellent, mate. Great to chat.
Cheers, brother Mark.
Thanks, mate. Thanks again to Heifer, who are proud world leaders in the manufacturing and supply of professional sheep shearing and clipping equipment. Thank you to MNSD Animal Health and Norflex Livestock Intelligence. They offer an extensive livestock product portfolio focused on animal health management, all backed up by exceptional service. We thank both of these companies for their ongoing support of the Head Shepherd podcast.